It was one of those crime scenes that, at first glance, seemed routine. A shattered window, a body on the floor, signs of a struggle. But I've learned over the years that the devil is in the details. And in this case, it was a single, seemingly insignificant, detail that made me realize we were looking at something entirely different. It was a rainy morning when I arrived at the victim's home. Lucas Freitas, a financial consultant living in a middle-class neighborhood. A neighbor had called the police after hearing glass shattering, followed by a triggered alarm. When the officers entered, they found Lucas on the living room floor, a deep slash across his neck, blood everywhere. It appeared someone had broken into a side window and attacked him, but that was the first inconsistency. The broken window was made of tempered glass, and anyone who knows that type of material understands it breaks into tiny, rounded pieces. But the glass on the living room floor was in long, irregular shards, the kind you'd find from regular glass. The tempered window was cracked, yes, but the scattered pieces looked like they'd come from somewhere else. I examined the impact point and noticed something stranger. Most of the shards were outside the house, not inside. If someone had broken in, it should have been the other way around. The garden had more glass than the living room. While the forensic team conducted standard procedures, I quietly pieced the puzzle together. Lucas' body was between the couch and the coffee table. His hand still clutched part of a broken whiskey bottle. Initially, it was assumed he tried to defend himself, but the cut patterns on his hand didn't match that. They were too shallow, as if he merely touched the shards. Then came the twist. There was another window, in the kitchen, facing the backyard. It was intact, but the floor was covered in old dust, except for one patch where fresh shoe prints disrupted the pattern. Someone had passed through, without forced entry. I returned to the living room and sat for a moment, just observing. That's when I noticed under the rug, slightly off-center, a small collection of glass fragments. But they were different. Clean, reflective, with fingerprints on the wrong side. The killer had staged the scene. They had deliberately broken a pre-cracked window from the outside through the right shards outside and left the wrong ones inside to simulate a break-in. And they missed the small details. Later, after reviewing the neighbor's security camera footage, the truth surfaced. No one was seen entering. But around 9 p.m. the previous night, a woman was caught exiting discreetly from the back. Her name? Amanda, Lucas's ex-girlfriend. They had a tumultuous breakup. And days before the crime, Lucas had filed for a restraining order against her. During questioning, Amanda denied everything. But she had used thin gloves to handle the glass, and the recovered shards bore partial prints, exactly on the sharp edges, something no one would touch by accident. The motive? Revenge, but with a restraining order in place. She knew she'd be an immediate suspect if anything happened, so she staged it to look like a robbery. But the glass was in the wrong place. When I got the call, it seemed like another routine case. A man found dead in his bedroom, apparently the victim of a heart attack. His name was Gustavo Salas, 49, a divorce executive who lived alone. His life was painfully organized, the kind of man who arranges his books alphabetically and never misses a calendar notification. But something felt off the moment I stepped into that room. Gustavo was lying on the bed, eyes open, a small trickle of blood from his nose, left arm stretched out. On his wrist, a luxury automatic watch. Stopped at 9:17 p.m. His ex-wife said she found him the next morning when she came to drop off some documents for their son. She had a spare key and used it when he didn't answer. She looked upset, but not truly shaken. I've seen grief that felt rehearsed. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was out of place. But that stopwatch nagged at me. Automatic watches don't stop unless you take them off for several hours. And Gustavo, from what I gathered, wore his all the time, even to bed. But more importantly, the estimated time of death from a preliminary autopsy was around 10:30 p.m., well after the supposed final tick of the watch. Then I noticed the phone charger, plugged in, cable lying limp on the floor. The phone itself? On the nightstand, turned off. A forensic sweep of the phone revealed it had been active until 10:28 p.m. That destroyed the theory that he died at 9:17. I went back to the watch. No visible damage. But in the lab, we found a piece of transparent tape jamming the rotor inside, deliberately stopping the mechanism. That's not something you do by accident. Suddenly, it all clicked. Someone had staged the scene. Someone wanted us to believe Gustavo died much earlier, and that someone had a reason to cover up the real time of death. We brought the ex-wife back in. Her story stayed the same. They were on good terms, she said. No bad blood. But when I casually mentioned the 9:17 timestamp on the watch, her face twitched, just for a moment. That was enough. We pulled surveillance. Her car passed a toll booth 10 minutes from Gustavo's home at 9:10 p.m. That wasn't in her statement. Then came the toxicology report. Gustavo had been poisoned with digitoxin, a cardiac drug that's deadly in high doses. It had been slipped into his usual nightly glass of whiskey. No fingerprints on the bottle or the glass. Wiped clean, she confessed. Gustavo had discovered she was embezzling money from their son's trust. He threatened to expose her. In desperation, she planned the murder, hoping it would look like a peaceful death, marked by a poetic touch, the stopped wristwatch. But tamper with time is like lying to gravity. It always pulls the truth back down. In the end, a watch that ticked too loudly, or didn't tick at all, told us everything we needed. When you work nearly 2 decades at crime scenes, you learn to read silence. Silence is never neutral. Sometimes it's grief. Other times, it hides something darker. That morning, at house number 17 on Maple Street, the silence felt suspicious, as if something or someone was watching from the shadows. That's when I saw the cat. It was a gray Persian, perched on top of the bookshelf in the living room, staring at the victim's body. It didn't meow, didn't move, just stared. His name was Murphy, and in this case, he would be everything. The victim was Amanda Keller, 32, a librarian, found near the dining table with blunt force trauma to the back of her head. No signs of forced entry. No foreign footprints. Just a body, an unfinished dinner, a spilled glass of wine, and Murphy. One of the first officers on the scene had said something odd. The cat hasn't left her side, barely moved. That stuck with me. Cats are unpredictable, but when something scares them, they react. Or flee. Murphy didn't. He looked too comfortable, like he knew the killer. In the kitchen, everything was in place. No struggle. The spilled wine had splashed away from Amanda's body, and the table was set for 2, but only her plate had food. Then I saw something, dust along the bottom edge of the back door, except for one patch. Someone had opened it recently, but it was locked from the inside. Back in the living room, Murphy watched me. That's when I noticed his fur had faint stains of red. Wine. Not a drop, a streak, like someone had held him, or he'd been sitting on someone's lap when the wine spilled. But Amanda was too far to have caused that. The wine didn't fall accidentally. I had forensics test the cat's fur. Bingo! Traces of mild sedative used for humans, but harmless animals in small doses. The killer knew Amanda would give the cat wine, and laced it. The spilled glass was staged. Why? Digging into Amanda's computer, I found emails with someone named David K. Morris. Their conversations were tense. She clearly didn't want anything to do with him. In her private notes, I found records of a disciplinary complaint. Morris was a former university professor stripped of his license for harassing students. Amanda had been the lead complainant, and now she was dead. Building security logs showed no sign of Morris. But a street camera caught a man in a cap and dark backpack slipping into the alley, just minutes before the estimated time of death. We got a warrant. In Morris's home, we found the backpack, traces of the sedative, and in the pocket, cat hair. During interrogation, he denied everything, until I said one word, Murphy. his face drained. Not because he feared the cat, but because he knew he left the evidence on him. Murphy didn't speak, but he stayed. He didn't run. He knew who was safe and who wasn't. In the end, the silence of a cat spoke louder than words. I had seen enough crime scenes in my life to know when something didn't quite sit right. But the night I walked into the Wexler residence, I wasn't prepared for how something as simple as a burnout lamp would unravel everything. It was supposed to be a home invasion. That's what the first officer on the scene said. A break-in, maybe a robbery gone wrong. The victim, Gregory Wexler, 53, was found in his study with a single bullet wound to the chest. No signs of struggle. His wife, Eleanor, had called it in, sobbing uncontrollably on the phone. I arrived about 40 minutes after the initial call. The house was a 2-story colonial in a gated neighborhood, the kind of place where crime felt like a distant concept, until it wasn't. Eleanor met me at the door. She was dressed in a silk robe, face pale, eyes swollen from crying. "I heard the shot from upstairs," she whispered. "I ran down and found him like that. I don't know who would do this." Inside, nothing was out of place. No signs of forced entry. No valuables missing. No drawers rummaged through. That was the first red flag. Home invasions, real ones, tend to be messy. Whoever had been there either wasn't there to steal or was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I stepped into the study. Gregory was still in his chair, slumped to the side, eyes frozen in shock. A glass of whiskey was half finished on the desk. The lights in the room were dim. Only the desk lamp was on. That lamp, something about it bothered me. As I scanned the room, I noticed a second lamp in the corner, a standing floor lamp with a burnt-out bulb. It was positioned in a way that it would have naturally lit the whole room, but it was off. At first, I assumed it had simply gone out. It happens. But then I traced the cord and found something odd. The lamp was unplugged. Why would a broken bulb matter? Because it told a story. Most people don't unplug a lamp unless they're changing the bulb or moving furniture. This one hadn't been moved. Dust rings on the carpet proved it had stood there a long time. And the bulb? It was fine, not burnout. I took it out and tested it with a flashlight trick I'd learned years ago. Still good. So someone had unscrewed the bulb to make it appear broken, then unplugged the lamp to make sure no one questioned why it wasn't working. But why? Why fake a broken lamp? I looked back at Gregory's desk. The only light source was that single desk lamp, aimed low, casting long shadows behind him. Whoever shot him didn't want to be seen clearly. They'd planned for the room to be dim. They want a clean shot, but not a clear view. Here's where it gets more interesting. We pulled the security footage from the doorbell camera. No one came in. No one left. Not in the time window we were working with, which meant either someone was already inside or the system had been tampered with. It hadn't. The system was intact. So the killer had to be someone in the house. I asked Eleanor if anyone else had been home. "No," she said. "Just me. I was taking a bath upstairs." Her voice cracked when she said it, and that's when I noticed something else. Her robe wasn't wet. Her hair was dry. She hadn't taken any bath. When I brought that up, she stammered. Said she dried off quickly. Said she didn't remember the details clearly because of the shock. It was believable, barely. But I knew better than to ignore the little details. We found gunshot residue on her left hand. When confronted, Eleanor didn't deny she fired a weapon. "Gregory kept the gun in his desk," she said. "I took it out after I found him, in case the intruder was still inside." It sounded rehearsed. Too convenient. So I asked the lab to run tests on the light switch and the bulb from the floor lamp. Prints came back. Hers. No gloves. She'd unscrewed the bulb herself. On the very night her husband died. Still, that wasn't quite enough. Motive was thin. No known affairs, no insurance windfalls, no clear reason for her to kill Gregory. Until we dug into Gregory's private email. Turns out Gregory had been planning to file for divorce. He had spoken to a lawyer just 2 weeks before his death. Worse, for Eleanor, he had recently changed his will. Everything was to go to his sister if the divorce went through. Eleanor would be left with nothing. Now she had motive, but the prosecution needed the final puzzle piece. That came from the autopsy. The angle of the bullet was unusual. It had come from above, at a slight angle to the right. The shooter had to be standing with the victim seated. Eleanor's height and dominant hand fit perfectly with the shot trajectory. She had waited until Gregory was relaxed, drinking. She'd unscrewed the lamp bulb beforehand to ensure shadows would hide her identity if he looked up. The low light would obscure her face. Then, one clean shot to the chest. The only mistake? She hadn't thought the lighting would matter. But that unplugged lamp, that fake burnout bulb, was what cracked the case wide open. I always tell people, crime scenes don't lie, but people do. The trick is knowing which one to trust. There are cases that stick to your memory not because of what was seen, but because of what shouldn't have been possible. I've walked into countless crime scenes during my years as a forensic expert. I've seen elaborate setups, staged alibis, blood patterns that told stories better than any witness. But this one was different. Because the story started with something that defied logic, a window locked from the outside. It was a cold Tuesday morning when I was called to a small townhouse on the edge of the city. The place belonged to a reclusive writer, Vincent Meller, mid-50s, lived alone, no kids, no pets. According to the neighbor, she hadn't seen Vincent in days and became suspicious after smelling something off near the front door. The patrol unit broke in and found him in the study, face down on his typewriter, a knife between his shoulder blades. At first glance, it seemed straightforward, a forced entry, a murder, possibly a robbery gone wrong. But when I stepped into that study, something felt too deliberate. The knife was clean, no smudges, no prints. Vincent's body was stiff. He'd been dead for at least 48 hours. But what really caught my eye wasn't on his desk. It was across the room, a window that looked out to the narrow alley behind the house. It was locked, nothing unusual, except for one thing. The latch had scratch marks, fresh ones. On the outside, I walked around to the alley. The ground was muddy from the recent rain. No footprints, no signs of struggle. But when I looked closely at the window frame, I found something tiny. A fiber, dark, synthetic, like it came from a glove, and a groove in the wood, like someone had used a tool to force the latch shut from the outside. Now tell me, who locks a window after committing a murder? And how? Back inside, I scanned the room more carefully. The study was untouched. No drawers open, nothing stolen, no signs of fight. Just Vincent, dead at his desk, and a typewriter with a page that ended mid-sentence. That sentence was odd too. It read, he knew the killer was behind him, but he couldn't. I froze. That wasn't a scene from one of his novels. That was a moment, real unfolding, almost like he was trying to leave a clue before he died. But the typewriter wasn't plugged in. Strange, considering the house had power. Stranger still, I checked the rest of the page. No blood drops on it, not even a smudge. That meant one thing. The page was placed there after he was already dead. Staged. Whoever did this wanted us to think he died mid-sentence, in the middle of some writerly epiphany. It was theatrical, too much so, and that's when the real investigation began. We dug into Vincent's life. No enemies, no debts. But he had one thing worth killing for, an unpublished manuscript, a novel he had kept locked in a desk drawer, except it wasn't there. The drawer had been opened, but no signs of damage. Whoever did it had the key, or knew how to pick a lock cleanly. Then came the surprise. His publisher, Clara Reeve, had recently sent him an ultimatum. Either deliver the manuscript within a month, or their contract was void. She claimed she hadn't seen him in weeks. But something about her demeanor when we questioned her felt rehearsed. She was calm, too calm, One small detail gave her away. During our second conversation, Clara said he was probably working late. As always, he liked that window open for fresh air. I hadn't told anyone about the window, let alone that it had been tampered with. It was sealed in our initial report, and not even the media had it. That meant she'd either been in that room or she knew someone who had. We got a warrant and searched her place. In her garage, hidden behind boxes of old books, we found a leather messenger bag. Inside, a copy of Vincent's manuscript. The title, Death Through the Window. Irony never comes quietly in this job. But what sealed it? A small, retractable tool used by locksmiths. And on the tip, a trace amount of paint. Same color as Vincent's window frame. It was her. She confessed eventually. Vincent had backed out of publishing the novel. He planned to self-publish and cut Claire out entirely. She couldn't afford that. Not financially and not professionally. So she did what she thought was clever. Staged a murder as a tragic writer's end and used the window as a red herring. She locked it from the outside with that tool, believing no one would question a closed window. But she didn't count on the scratches, or the sentence on the typewriter being too clean, or the fact that real crimes don't end like novels. You see, that's the thing about stage crime scenes. They try to tell a story, but stories have structure. Real life, real death, it's messy, it's imperfect. And when something looks too neat, that's when you start asking the hard questions. I've learned that in this job, it's never about what they want you to see. It's about what they try to hide. And sometimes it's just a window that doesn't make sense.